Welcome to another episode of Beautiful, Bad and Bizarre. Today we're in East Sussex, Hurstmonceux, to visit the grave of the wonderful actress Peggy Cummins. Born Augusta Margaret Diane Fuller, although you will see on her headstone later in the video Augusta would use a slightly different version of her birth name, on the 18th of December 1925 to parents Franklin Bland Fuller, who was a newspaper editor, and Margaret Cummins, who was an actress and often went by her maiden name of Margaret Treacy. Margaret had appeared in the 1948 films Smart Woman and The Sign of the Ram, and she also took part in the 1951 series Studio One, appearing in Season 3, Episode 28, titled One Pair of Hands. Margaret had previously been married to William Cummins, and the couple had two sons, William, born in 1914, and Harry, who was born in 1915. It's not clear exactly when Margaret began a relationship with Augusta's father, Franklin, or if Margaret ever divorced William, who passed away in 1941. If anyone knows more details about that, please leave a comment below, as I'd absolutely love to know more. By the time of Augusta's birth, the couple were in Wales. There is a story that they were just visiting and they were delayed on returning to Ireland by a storm. However, I believe that's not true. Although Margaret did return to Ireland shortly after Augusta was born, Franklin had been living in and around Wales for some time. Margaret's relationship with Franklin ended during 1927. It seems Franklin was in constant trouble, which included being put on probation for passing worthless cheques and then being jailed in 1927 for 4 months for the same offence. In 1933 he was facing charges of manslaughter, but he did not receive a prison sentence. Instead, he had to make restitution to the widow of the person that died, and in 1935 he was convicted for dangerous driving and received a fine. And by the age of 48, on the 18th of May 1943, Franklin had died of drowning at Fenit, a small village in County Kerry, Ireland, possibly after having a heart attack swimming in the sea. Margaret kept the surname Cummins, and Augusta would use the stage name Peggy Cummins from an early age, and from here on in I'll refer to Augusta as Peggy Cummins. After returning to Dublin with her mother, Peggy wanted to be a ballet dancer and would eventually begin dancing lessons at the Abbey School of Ballet, and coming from a creative background, she was encouraged to make her first stage appearance as a child and would often play the role of young boys at the Gate Theatre in Dublin. At the age of 8, Peggy achieved local fame in Dublin, playing the part of the child in Elmer Rice's Judgment Day. It was reported that she possessed remarkable poise and technical skills at an early age. Peggy was invited to London to perform on stage, and in December 1938, at the age of 13, opening on Peggy's actual birthday, she performed a leading role in the children's revue Let's Pretend at St James's Theatre. She was a huge success and soon was being offered multiple roles, acting on radio and in films. In 1940 she was working alongside Irene Handel in the British drama Dr. O'Dowd, and in 1942 she was performing in the film Salute John Citizen with Dinah Sheridan, Jimmy Hanley and Stanley Holloway. I have a video featuring the life of Stanley Holloway on this channel. I'll put a link in the description of this video. Further parts swiftly followed. However, it was the lead part in the stage production of the American play Junior Miss, with Peggy playing the role of Fluffy at the Savile Theatre in London in 1943, that was to change the path of Peggy's future career. Hollywood film producer Darrell F. Zanuck had come to London to study British war propaganda and was in the audience. He was so impressed with Peggy that he asked her, "How would you like to go to Hollywood?" Prior to Zanuck's offer, Peggy had mostly played the girl next door or the little sister type roles. She was very petite and modest in her appearance, which allowed her to play much younger roles, while her strong character and personality kept her firmly in the spotlight, which was one of the reasons at 17 she was playing the part of a 12-year-old in Junior Miss. At 19 in 1944, she was playing the lead role of Alice in Alice in Wonderland at the Palace Theatre with Margaret Rutherford as the Queen of Hearts. Taking up Darryl Zanuck's offer, Peggy headed out to Hollywood in 1945. She was given the lead role in the film Forever Amber, which was a luxurious Technicolor film produced by 20th Century Fox and based on the best-selling historical novel of the same name. Peggy must have been so overwhelmed at such an opportunity, and one can only imagine her excitement on hearing the role was hers, especially when you consider the part was being coveted by Gene Tierney, Maureen O'Hara and Paulette Goddard, who all wanted the chance to play the lead role. Peggy was the 37th actress to be tested for the part, and it was decided that she would be perfect for it. She would be playing opposite a young Vincent Price, who was cast in a supporting role. Filming began in March 1946, and Peggy was due to appear in every scene but one. Unfortunately, on the 30th of March, Peggy collapsed on set due to illness. After she'd made a recovery, on the 30th of April, the film was halted. Initially, Peggy Cummins was perfect for the young Amber, but as the character grew into adulthood, there were issues that seemed to be insurmountable. Low-cut outfits had previously been created for the racy parts of the film. After taking one look at Peggy, the costume designers decided these would not work at all and had to discard them at significant expense. This was only the initial issue. After viewing the rushes halfway through the film, Zanuck felt that John Stahl, the director, needed to be fired. He was succeeded by the dictatorial Otto Preminger, who chose to start fresh, firing Peggy as part of his first move. He remarked that the movie's opening scenes appeared hopelessly out of date. He said of Peggy, "She's not up to it. She appears too young and seems unprofessional." Her lack of costume experience was the polite justification offered publicly. Peggy and the director were not the only casualties. Vincent Price and another member of the cast were unceremoniously fired. Eventually, Peggy Cummins would be replaced by Linda Darnell. During an interview in 2013, Peggy said, "I came here in 45 from England to play in Forever Amber and wasn't, they said, whoever they are, I wasn't sexy enough. But that's life." She also said that it was shattering to get a part like that and then to find the production was shut down. Again, in 2015, she referred to being fired from Forever Amber, telling the author, Barbara Roisman Cooper, "Maybe I wasn't the right kind of sexy. Maybe I was too young. Maybe I wasn't voluptuous enough. I don't know if there's anybody alive today who knows the real story." Peggy went on to say, "If I had begun with Clooney Brown, I think my career would have been very different." Peggy had tested for a part in Clooney Brown just before being tested for the part of Amber. Despite how it must have affected Peggy's self-esteem at the time, given that the movie was an expensive financial flop with terrible reviews, it might have turned out for the best in the end and less shattering in the long run. Years later, she said that when she saw the reviews upon release, "I just felt relieved." It certainly wasn't the end of the career of Peggy Cummins. While it almost definitely took the wind out of her sails, she appeared in many roles for Fox, including Moss Rose with Victor Mature, Ethel Barrymore and Vincent Price. She was also in the 1948 thriller Escape, starring Rex Harrison, and would work in a film that was considered one of her best, My Daughter Joy, also known as Operation X, with Edward G. Robinson playing her father. The film would be released in 1950. But it was the last film that she made in America that would bring back sexy and years later make Peggy Cummins an iconic star of the B-movie film noir. That film was 1950's Gun Crazy, which was initially marketed as Deadly is the Female. Peggy would play the part of the glamorous femme fatale with a fondness for shooting, earning her the tagline, "Evil in a tight skirt." And this time it was Peggy replacing a star. Veronica Lake was in the frame to play the lead role, but it was at a time that she was becoming very unreliable due to her problem with alcohol. Peggy's character in the film was Annie Laurie Starr, a beautiful, sexy carnival sharpshooter who marries John Dole's character, Bart Tare, a gun-obsessed army veteran who Annie prods into a string of progressively brutal crimes. The script, based on a story by McKinley Cantor, was written by both Mr. Cantor and the acclaimed screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, although Cantor never knew this because Trumbo was blacklisted at the time. Another screenwriter called Millard Kaufman was credited instead. The movie cost $400,000 and was made in 30 days and was released with little promotion or fanfare, but would develop a cult following in the fullness of time and would come to be considered a significant precursor to Bonnie and Clyde and cited as an inspiration for new wave filmmakers. Peggy would state, "Until Gun Crazy, I'd played pretty blonde types, so I loved the idea of this character. This was a meaty part I'd been hoping for." Gun Crazy was directed by Joseph H. Lewis and came to be regarded as Mr. Lewis's masterpiece. Writing in the New York Times in 1991, before a screening of Mr. Lewis's films at the Public Theatre in Manhattan, the screenwriter and critic Jay Cox and the director Martin Scorsese called Gun Crazy a great movie that never set out to be one, noting that it caught the delirium of crime and matched it up with a special kind of sexual heat. Dole's character is a smiling sociopath with an abiding love for guns but no real violence in his heart, they continued. Cummins plays one of those pure noir incarnations of the id, evil in a tight skirt. Although there had been rumours of affairs with Cary Grant and Howard Hughes, rumours that Peggy refused to deny or confirm, personally, I feel doubtful and would imagine Peggy revelled in the rumours. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Peggy Cummins would return to England to marry businessman Derek Dunnett on the 14th of December 1950. Derek's family owned the prosperous Carter's Seeds business with a 19-acre site, including glass houses, seed beds, testing grounds and storage warehouses. The firm became world famous, winning many awards for excellence. On one occasion, shortly after their marriage, Peggy thought it would be a good idea to have a picnic and fireworks show with friends on her father-in-law's property. Enjoying their party close to the countless acres of hothouses where they raised all the unusual plants for their seeds, as night fell, Derek brought out a sizable box and began lighting the fireworks, one by one. The vibrantly coloured fireworks lit up the sky, but suddenly one took on a life of its own and flew straight through the main hothouse roof. The party's initial response was to flee like mischievous children. When the question, "What are you going to do?" was posed to Derek, he contacted the fire brigade anonymously after saying, "My father will never forgive me for this," recognising the enormously detrimental impact it would have on the company. They all quickly left the scene and left the fire brigade to it, hoping they would limit the damage. The main hothouse at Carter's Seeds was extensively damaged, and the newspaper headlines the following day reported the incident had put the business in financial trouble. Derek was forced to tell his father everything, and after that it was said that their relationship was never quite the same. After her marriage, Peggy continued on with her career, making films that included To Dorothy a Son in 1954, starring Shelley Winters, and in 1957 she appeared in the horror film Night of the Demon. If you've seen my previous video on Terence Morgan, there's a link in the description of this video if you haven't. You'll know that during the 1950s, Peggy and Terence were in films together, including Always the Bride in 1953. However, it's the 1957 film Hell Drivers with Stanley Baker that is one of my all-time favourites that Peggy appeared in. In March 1954, Peggy gave birth to an 8-pound 6-ounce baby boy, and she and Derek named him David. After David's birth, Peggy continued to work, and in January 1962 she would give birth to her daughter Diana Tracy, who weighed in at 7 pounds. During the early 1960s, Peggy decided to retire from acting. Her last film, released in 1961, was called In the Doghouse. It was a comedy about a London vet, played by Leslie Phillips, featuring such stars as Hattie Jacques, James Booth, Fenella Fielding and Joan Hickson, and not forgetting another personal favourite of mine, Jacqueline Jones. Although she continued for a while to make occasional appearances on television, Peggy Cummins preferred to invest her time and energy into her family life. Her family were her priority, and she also became very active in charity organisations, particularly raising money and chairing the management committee of a holiday centre for children with disabilities in Sussex. And she was the trustee of the Stars Foundation for Cerebral Palsy. Sadly, Peggy's husband, Derek Dunnett, died in East Sussex on the 10th of July 2000, aged 79. Later in her life, partly due to the resurging success of Gun Crazy, which in 1998 had been selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, Peggy Cummins became a sought-after speaker on the celebrity vintage film circuit, appearing as far away as San Francisco and Hollywood for film festivals and autograph signings, which she seemed to take a great delight in. Peggy Cummins died at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London on the 29th of December 2017, just 11 days after her 92nd birthday, following a stroke. Although on the surface it appears that the roles Peggy was offered did not showcase her wonderful talents to their full potential, her amazing screen presence was always visible, and you can't help but be mesmerised watching Peggy perform on screen. It's without doubt that she didn't get the full exposure that she deserved, but on the other hand, Peggy Cummins lived a wonderful life. She kept her beautiful looks and was far more than just a pretty face, with her devotion to her family and her charity. I'd say Peggy Cummins' life was a life of inspiration and a life well lived, and one to be admired. In loving memory of William Herbert Derek Dunnett, the 9th of February 1921 to the 10th of July 2000, and Margaret Diane Augusta, December the 18th, 1925 to December the 29th, 2017. Beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents. Thank you so much for joining me here today in this wonderful step back in time to remember the life of the actress Peggy Cummins. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I sincerely hope you'll join me in the next one.